What will you do when you find out two of your young children, below 10 years, are sexually involved with each other? Let's explore this together. Once upon a time, in a small city where life seemed almost too good to be true, the Benson family stood out as the perfect example of love, harmony, and hard work. They weren't just admired, they were celebrated. Everyone in the neighborhood spoke highly of Mr. and Mrs. Benson, a couple whose kindness was rivaled only by their dedication to providing for their family. Their children, Ada and Emeka, were the shining stars of the community. Ada, the eldest, had a radiant smile that seemed to melt hearts and brighten even the gloomiest days. She was a natural leader, full of life and charm, adored by everyone. Then there was Emeka, her quiet, thoughtful younger brother. Wherever Ada went, Emeka was right behind her, like her shadow. He mirrored her every emotion. If she laughed, he laughed. If she cried, he was there to wipe away her tears. Together, they were inseparable, the kind of siblings who made you wish for a bond that deep. Despite their parents' long work hours, Ada and Emeka created their own little world at home. Afternoons were filled with laughter as they played games, exchanged stories, or simply sat together in peaceful silence, basking in the comfort of each other's company. Nights were even more special. They shared the same bed, whispering secrets about their wildest dreams and deepest fears, their voices barely above a murmur. In those quiet moments, they weren't just siblings, they were each other's safe haven, the kind of connection that felt unbreakable. But beneath this idyllic family portrait lay a secret, a chilling twist that no one in the neighborhood could have ever imagined. What began as a tale of perfect harmony would soon unravel into a story that left everyone speechless. What happened to the Benson family that changed everything? Stay tuned for a revelation that will leave you questioning just how well you know the people you admire most. One fateful afternoon, Emeka ran into Ada's room, excitement lighting up his face. "Ada, look what I've got," he exclaimed, holding up a shiny new smartphone. Their father had bought it for him recently, and Emeka had taken it to school that day. Some older boys had shown him websites and videos that he didn't understand. "What is it?" Ada asked curiously. "Here," Emeka said, climbing onto her bed. He opened a video, and the screen filled with images of grown-ups doing things neither of them could comprehend. "What are they doing?" Ada asked, frowning. "I don't know," Emeka said with a giggle. "But it's funny. It makes me feel strange." That day, curiosity took root. The siblings began watching these videos in secret. At first, it was like observing something bizarre and foreign. But soon, it became a routine, a shared secret they didn't fully understand. The strange feelings stirred by the videos became addictive. One day, Emeka whispered, "Ada, what if we try what they're doing?" Ada hesitated, her heart pounding. "What if Mama finds out?" she asked. "She won't," Emeka replied confidently. "It's just us." Trusting her brother, Ada agreed. What began as a game quickly spiraled into something far more serious. The siblings fell into a pattern of mimicking what they had seen, unaware of the consequences. Their bond, once innocent and pure, became tainted with guilt and secrecy. Years passed, and the weight of their actions grew heavier. By the time Ada was 14 and Emeka 12, their secret felt like a chain that bound them together. Despite their guilt, they didn't know how to stop. At 19, Ada found herself facing a crisis. She began experiencing symptoms of pregnancy. Terrified, the siblings pooled their savings and sought help from a local clinic. They lied to obtain abortion pills, hiding their shame. This cycle repeated itself, and with each incident, Ada's health deteriorated. By the age of 24, Ada had grown into a stunning young woman with a confident demeanor that masked the storms within her. Despite her haunted past, she had an undeniable charm that drew people to her. When she met Daniel, a successful businessman with a kind heart, It felt like fate had offered her a lifeline. Daniel, captivated by Ada's beauty and gentle spirit, pursued her relentlessly. He showered her with affection, gifts, and promises of a bright future. For the first time in years, Ada allowed herself to hope. Daniel represented everything she had longed for, a chance to escape her past and start anew. When he proposed with a glittering diamond ring, Ada hesitated, the weight of her secrets pressing heavily on her heart. But the lure of a fresh start was too strong to resist. With a trembling voice, she accepted his proposal, vowing to leave her past behind. After the wedding, Ada made the painful decision to end her illicit relationship with Emeka. One evening, she called him into her room, her heart pounding. "We can't do this anymore, Emeka," she said firmly, avoiding his gaze. Emeka's face fell. "Ada, you can't just leave me. We've been through everything together. You're all I have." Tears welled in Ada's eyes, but she steeled herself. "I'm married now. I have to move on. This has to end." Emeka's heart broke into 1,000 pieces, but he didn't argue. He nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping as he walked out of the room. That night, Ada cried herself to sleep, mourning the loss of a bond that had once felt unbreakable. For a while, Ada's life seemed perfect. Daniel adored her, their home was beautiful, and their future seemed bright. But as months turned into years, one shadow lingered. She couldn't conceive. Daniel, though patient and supportive, began to grow concerned. "Let's see a doctor," he suggested gently one evening. Ada hesitated, fear clawing at her chest. She agreed, hoping against hope that the problem was minor. They visited several doctors, each appointment more devastating than the last. Finally, a kind but somber gynecologist delivered the truth. "Mrs. Benson," he began, "your medical history shows signs of severe scarring in your womb. It's consistent with multiple abortions. The damage is extensive. Conceiving naturally may be impossible." Ada's world crumbled. The words echoed in her mind, each syllable a dagger to her heart. Daniel sat beside her, stunned. "Abortions?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ada couldn't meet his eyes. At home, Daniel confronted her. "Ada, what haven't you told me?" His tone was sharp, a mix of confusion and hurt. Ada trembled. She had always known this moment might come, but she hadn't prepared for it. I had to do things I'm not proud of," she stammered, tears streaming down her face. Daniel's expression hardened. "Things? Ada, we're married. You're supposed to trust me. How many abortions?" She broke down, confessing the truth in pieces, each word heavier than the last. She told him about Emeka, their twisted bond, and the choices they had made in the secrecy of their youth. Daniel was silent for a long time, his face unreadable. Then he stood, his movements deliberate. "You lied to me," he said quietly. "You hid this from me. How was I supposed to build a life with you when you carried this darkness all along?" "Daniel, please," Ada begged, clutching his arm. "I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. I was afraid." But Daniel pulled away. "I can't do this, Ada. I need time to think." He left that night, packing a small bag and walking out the door. The truth didn't just destroy Ada's marriage, it sent ripples through her entire family. Her parents, hearing of her inability to conceive, invited her and Daniel to a family meeting. It was there, under the pressure of their concerned gazes, that Ada's secret spilled out. Her mother wailed, clutching her chest, while her father sat in stunned silence. "What have we done?" he murmured. Daniel, unable to bear the weight of it all, made his decision. "I can't stay married to someone who hid so much from me. I'm sorry, but I'm leaving." Ada begged him to reconsider, but his mind was made up. He filed for divorce shortly after, leaving her alone with her guilt and regrets. Ada, now divorced and childless, returned to her parents' home. The once vibrant woman was a shadow of herself, haunted by the choices of her past. Her family, too, was in shambles, their once proud name now whispered in scandal throughout the neighborhood. In the midst of the chaos, another shocking revelation emerged. Mr. and Mrs. Benson confessed that Emeka was not Ada's biological brother. What had happened was after Ada's birth, the Bensons' happiness was shadowed by disappointment. Despite their efforts, Mrs. Benson was unable to conceive another child. Visits to doctors revealed a grim reality. Mrs. Benson's womb had suffered complications during childbirth, leaving her unable to carry another pregnancy. While Mrs. Benson was heartbroken, Mr. Benson's family felt differently. In their eyes, a son was essential to carry on the Benson name. His mother, a traditionalist matriarch, made her expectations clear. "Mr. Benson," she said one evening, "a man without a son is like a tree without roots. You must find a way." Mr. Benson loved his wife deeply, but the pressure from his family was relentless. His mother and uncles began suggesting drastic measures, marrying a second wife or fathering a child outside their marriage. Mrs. Benson, fearing for her place in the family, began to grow desperate. One evening, Mrs. Benson confided in her husband. "Mr. Benson," she began hesitantly, "if having a son is what your family demands, perhaps there is another way. We could adopt." Mr. Benson frowned. Adoption was a foreign concept to his family, seen as unnatural. "What will people say?" he asked. "Let them talk," Mrs. Benson replied, her voice firm. "We know the truth. We can give a child a home, and your family will have their son." After weeks of heated discussions and Mrs. Benson's unwavering determination, Mr. Benson agreed. They decided to adopt a newborn boy, ensuring the child would feel like their own from the start. Through a distant relative, they learned of a young girl in a nearby village who had fallen pregnant out of wedlock. Her family, ashamed, had planned to give the baby away quietly after birth. The Bensons saw this as their opportunity. When the baby boy was born, Mr. Benson and Mrs. Benson traveled to the village. The child's mother, a teenager named Ada, handed over the baby with tears streaming down her face. "Please," she whispered, "give him a good life." The Bensons named the boy Emeka, a name that Mr. Benson chose from a book he had once read. They introduced him to their family as their biological child. To maintain the illusion, they claimed Mrs. Benson had given birth to him during a trip to visit a distant cousin. For years, the secret remained buried. Emeka grew up believing he was their biological son. They loved and cared for him just as much as Ada. Mrs. Benson doted on him, perhaps even more than Ada, out of guilt for the deception. He had been adopted as a baby because Mrs. Benson was unable to conceive again. They had kept the truth hidden, thinking it would protect their family, but it only deepened the wounds. Emeka, consumed by a storm of guilt and shame, vanished one night without a trace. There were no goodbyes, no explanations, just the eerie silence of his sudden absence. His disappearance left Ada shattered, her world reduced to echoes of what once was. The love they had shared, once a source of strength, now felt like a haunting memory, weighed down by unspoken regrets and unresolved pain. Left to face the harsh realities alone, Ada bore the crushing burden of their shared past like a heavy stone strapped to her soul. Every whispered conversation in the market, every sympathetic glance from neighbors, reminded her of the life that had unraveled so completely. She became a solitary figure, walking the same streets where she and Emeka had once been seen as an inseparable pair, now cloaked in a veil of loneliness and sorrow. The Benson family, once the shining example of what a perfect family could be, became a grim reminder of the consequences of secrecy and neglect. Their fall from grace was the story everyone whispered about, but no one dared to confront directly. Parents warned their children with hushed tones, "Don't end up like the Bensons," and neighbors who once celebrated their unity now spoke of them with pity and disdain. Their home, once filled with laughter and warmth, became a shadow of its former self. The vibrant garden grew wild and untamed, a symbol of the family's decline. The once pristine walls bore the marks of time, a reflection of the cracks that had long existed beneath the surface. Yet, in the quiet of her solitude, Ada clung to a flicker of hope, however dim. She often sat by the window, staring into the distance, as if waiting for Emeka to return, or perhaps for the pain to loosen its grip. Despite the weight she carried, she held on to the strength that still lingered within her, proof that even in the depths of despair, the human spirit could endure. The lesson. This story is a reminder to parents: pay attention to your children. Teach them right from wrong, guide them, and create an environment where they can talk to you openly. Secrets, left to fester, will eventually come to light, and the damage they cause can be irreparable. A family's strength lies in trust, communication, and love. Without these, even the strongest bonds can break.